Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our second CFR training webinar session for the 2024 calendar year consolidated fiscal report. Yesterday's sessions went well and we covered some good topics. We also had a pretty good sized crowd. That session's recording will be posted shortly along with today's session on YouTube. We will send an email out to all providers notifying them of when they are available and where they can be found. Today, we will have approximately 800 attendees again. So hopefully today's session is just as beneficial for you. My name is Alpa Amin. I'm one of the representatives for OPWDD and will be hosting today's webinar. Today's NY State representative will be as follows. Representing OSS, Paul Green, Paul Sutton, Lisa Vickery. Representing OMS, Michelle Zelensky, Josh Becker, and Hoffman. Representing OPWDD, Francis Fusillo, Kenneth Glenmeyer, Alpa Amin, Emily Seward. Representing SCD, Catherine Cochran, Mackenzie Bisler, Ian Hart. Representing DOH, Jeffrey Nicholson, Nicole Miliose. Also, we have a survey that will pop up at the end of the event. We would greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill out the survey so that we can continue to make this training better each time. Session 2 will cover CFR's web utilities menu, general and agency-specific changes, highlights, and supplementals, SUPP-1 schedule, claim reporting, DMH2, and DMH3. Questions and answers. This slide is important, and hopefully you have had the opportunity to check out previous Q&As that have been posted on OMH website. We strongly encourage all attendees to ask questions through the Q&A function in the webinar. It is on your right-hand side of your screen, and you might have to click the arrow next to the Q&A to open up the dialog box. If you don't see it, click the three dots at the bottom right of the WebEx and then click Q&A. We will not be answering questions today, but plan on answering all the questions and posting answer online along with the recording of this webinar so that everyone can get the benefits of this webinar and the questions asked. CFR contact information. When you have a question, this slide shows how to contact each agency. Most of us are still working hybrid in-office remote schedule, so all the agencies prefer email contact. New York State Department of Health providers may submit questions regarding their CFR submission by email to DOH email address listed on this slide. Any questions related to claim can go to the contacts listed on this slide. As noted on the previous slide, email would be the preferred method. By the end of this seminar, we hope to accomplish the following goals. Provide NYS agency contact information for specific questions not covered during this training session. Identify any major changes that have occurred since the release of January 1, 2023 through December 31st, 2023 CFR manual. Discuss important policies, principles, and rules regarding completion of the CFR via CFR as web. Help providers become familiar with the claiming and supplemental schedules. I will now pass on the presenting to our first panelist for today's session.
Good morning. My name is Francis Vasilio. I work with the CFR unit at OPWDD. We're going to cover the utilities menu, which is very useful in the CFR process. First thing, depending on the size of your screen, you may have to scroll down to see all the options in the utilities menu. And secondly, I get calls from time to time from people who say that they see some of the menu, but they're grayed out. And that's usually because they haven't first entered into the CFR that they want to work out of. So you have to go in through edit mode to either a submitted CFR through the dashboard or through work in progress for one that hasn't been submitted. And once you're in there, then you go to utilities, and then you'll see the full range of options that your role entitles you to. If you don't have submitter privileges, submit will still be grayed out. One of the options here is, and I covered this yesterday when discussing DMH1, is transfer the data from DMH1 to DMH2. As you see here, the first column is you select which programs you want to transfer over. Not all programs require claiming schedules, so you don't want to necessarily click everything. You also may have a program that operates in multiple counties, in which case you have an option there to divide up a program, the information there, and you assign a percentage to each county. This is where that takes place. You have an option off the utilities menu to import data from a text file. I know some of the larger providers do this because they have so many different program sites. This is where you can do that. And if you use the help feature, you'll get more guidance on exactly how you can do this, how your file has to be set up, and you can take it from there. You can also export out of your CFR file to, say, an Excel spreadsheet. You go in, choose the export item off the utilities menu. You can select which schedules you want to export data from. And here's an example of what it might look like in an Excel spreadsheet. And this is can be useful for you for checking your work and checking it against your general ledger. If you have brought forward information from a previous CFR, but you need to make some changes to, say, your funding source, you can choose that item off here. If you choose the pencil off to the right there, you can go in and change a funding source code. If you choose the transcan, you can delete a funding source code that's no longer applicable. The DCN, document control number. So before you can submit a CFR that you've worked on, you have to validate and get a DCN. The document control number will then be printed at the bottom of every page of your CFR. It will also be at the bottom of your certifications. If you print your certification pages before a DCN's been assigned, they're not going to be valid. At the bottom where the DCN should be, it'll say document control number not assigned. And you send them to us, and then we just tell you, no, they're no good. You have to go back in and print them again once you have the DCN. So to get a DCN, one of the options off the utility says validate submission assign DCN. You've gone into your CFR work in progress, you go to utilities, you choose this option, validate submission assign DCN, and then sadly you get a whole list of things that you failed. you see the second item there just says warning. This is something where you've been warned that something wasn't completed, but it's not something that'll stop you from getting your DCN. If it says failure, this is something that has to be corrected before you can go back and validate again to get a DCN. And if you're successful, you get a message like this on your computer that says it successfully passed validations, and it tells you what the DCN has been assigned for the submission. At that point, you can choose submit if you have that submitter privilege, and you can go ahead off the utilities function and submit your CFR to the state agencies that are included for their review. Keep in mind that if at some point later you go back in to review or amend a CFR that's been submitted, you'll get a message saying that the DCN will be removed, and then you'll have to go through that validation process again. This is actually the way, if you get a review letter from one of the agencies telling you to make some changes, you should go in to the already submitted CFR and go through edit mode. You get that warning, you proceed, you make the changes, then you validate again. I was speaking to somebody recently, and they thought they had to go through the create process to create a new CFR and then import from the one that had already been submitted. That's really not the recommended way to handle this. If you have a request to amend an existing submitted CFR, you should just go in, choose it, open it up, choose edit, and proceed from there. If you go to your work in progress, you'll see there may be different CFRs that you were working on for different periods. You see there the last one listed, it says the DCN was assigned, but it was not yet submitted. If you've gone through submission, you go here to this work in progress, you would select the one that has the DCN assigned, and you can go ahead and submit. Keep in mind, you won't be able to have more than one DCN for the same reporting period with the same state agencies listed in work in progress at any one time. We're still on the submission process, so you go in and you've got these options here. You can view it, edit, or submit. If you choose submit and you've chosen the one that says the DCN is assigned and you hit submit, then you get this success screen pops up. It says your DCN has been submitted, and it gives you the date. And at that point, it moves out of work in progress over to the submission dashboard. And here you see under the submission dashboard for this period, you see one there listed. Now, if you submitted 2 or 3 CFRs for the same period, they would all be listed there. There's another option off the utilities menu. Suppose you created a new CFR and you brought forward last year's CFR to start the process, but there's been a change because now you've either no longer running a program funded by one of these state agencies, or you've added a new program by a new state agency. you can go in here to update the one new submission you've created to either add or remove a state agency. If you're removing a state agency, it'll remove all the programs for that state agency that were included in the previous submission. If you're adding a state agency, the next step will be you have to go in to submission site definition and add those programs for that state agency you're adding to the CFR. You have to create them in the CFR. If you've gone in and you attempted to update submission by adding another state agency, but there's already one in the work in progress with this for that period with the same state agencies, you get this failure message here that you can't do that. Printing. So you can choose to print your whole CFR, just to have a paper copy sitting in your office. All of you need to, at some point, after the DCN's been assigned, to click on the certifications, CFR I, II, or II-A, III, and IV, and print those out so that you can have those signed and dated and sent back to us. I recommend to everyone, instead of printing directly to your printer, because these are set up to print on legal size paper, if you just print, and when it says select your printer, if you choose print to PDF, then you can adjust the size so it can fit on regular paper if you want to. That's something I recommend that all of you do. Once you've chosen what you want to print, there's also other options here. The first set are the usual things that different schedules people might want to print out. And then there's also some more advanced options there. You can also choose only to print for the DMH schedules for a certain county. This is where you would choose to do that. You can choose to print only schedules that pertain to certain state agency. These are all options off the print menu. Quite frequently, especially when this all started originally, we would get calls from people saying, I went to print and nothing happened. Well, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, a little icon will pop up that says pop-up blocker. And basically, you block pop-ups on your computer, which is normally a good thing to do, but you can't use this program to print with that on. So you can just click on that pop-up button there in the upper right, and it'll ask you, do you want to allow pop-ups for this program? And you say yes. And once you do it one time, you're set. You don't have to go in every time you print from now on. So that solves almost all the printing problems we get. And now I'm going to pass this off to the next person.
Good morning. My name is Joshua Baker, and I'm representing the Office of Mental Health. Today, I will be discussing general changes and highlights and any specific changes for the Office of Mental Health. Any changes from the previous CFR manual are detailed in the recently released fiscal year CFR transmittal letter. The transmittal letter can be found on the SED link below. Please keep in mind when carrying data forward, changes to funding source codes or program codes may need to be updated. The next two slides highlight a list of internal controls provided by the New York State Office of Mental Health Bureau of Audit to assist you in providing and detecting fraud. The KPMG fraud survey found that organizations are reporting more experiences of fraud than in prior years, and that 3 out of 4 organizations have uncovered fraud. The New York State Office of Mental Health Bureau of Audit has provided the following list of internal controls to assist in preventing and detecting fraud at your agency. The top 10 internal controls to prevent and detect fraud. Number 1, use a system of checks and balances to ensure no one person has control over all parts of the financial transaction. Number 2, reconcile agency bank accounts every month. 3, restrict use of agency credit cards and verify all charges made to credit cards or accounts to ensure they were business related. 4, provide board of directors oversight of agency operations and management. 5, prepare all fiscal policies and procedures in writing and obtain board of directors approval. Number 6, ensure that agency assets such as vehicles, cell phones, equipment, and other agency resources are used only for official business. 7, protect petty cash funds and other cash funds. 8, protect checks against fraudulent use. 9, protect cash and check collections. And 10, avoid or discourage related party transactions. The recordings of prior period CFR training presentations are available at the following YouTube links. Additionally, the current CFR training presentation will be added to the OPWDD YouTube page at a later date. The written responses to the Q&A from the current CFR training presentation will be added to the OMH website at a date to be determined. These responses, as well as previous Q&As, can be found at the link below. Section 2 for submission requirements of the CFR manual were updated to include governmental entity CFR certification submission requirements were amended to remove CFR II as an option, leaving the options of the CFR II in the compliance review. Section 8, the CFRS web announcement list was deleted from the CFRS web resources and general information table. The FAQ related to bad debt expenses was updated to include credit losses. See the screenshot below to see where bad debt or credit losses should be claimed on the CFR. For Section 9, getting started, a note was added that the certified financial statement period start date and the certified financial statement period end date are required fields for not-for-profit and proprietary full and abbreviated CFR filers. Section 11 of the CFR manual, governmental entity CFR certification submission requirements were amended to remove CFR II as an option. The CFR II header was amended to remove county government. Section 12 of the CFR manual was updated as follows. Added line 13 to CFR IV, SED only providers. Did the executive director or chief financial officer complete the required annual online CFR training? SED providers will now be required to submit the CFR IV certification schedule as applicable. Section 13 and Section 15 of the CFR manual were updated as follows. The predefined entry bad debt on CFR 1, line 40, and CFR 3, line 17 were changed to bad debt expense and/or credit losses. Section 33A of the CFR manual was updated to the note regarding integrated outpatient services was deleted. Section 57 of the CFR manual was updated to line 1 on the list of non-allowable costs was updated to include credit losses. Section 62, all references to LGU municipalities were changed to governmental entities. All references to DMH were changed to OPWDD, OMH, OASIS, and DOH. Governmental entity CFR certification submission requirements were amended to remove CFR II as an option. An updated version of the compliance review has been added as an enterable schedule in the CFRS web. The following fields have been added. Following additional fields have been added as fillable fields for the compliance review. Section 66, Appendage GG, allocation of integrated outpatient services and certified community behavioral health clinics. For providers that are approved by New York State to operate an integrated outpatient service clinic or a certified community behavioral health clinic, it is necessary to allocate the allocate the program revenues and expenses between the New York State agencies that issued the underlying operating certifications. iOS Clinic is recorded under the program code 2100 for OMH, 3520 for OASIS, and under program code 1580 for DOH, if DOH has provided one of the underlying certifications. Programs are required to maintain support documentation showing that they have complied with the required method of allocating revenues and costs. The initial allocation between OMH, OASIS, and DOH must be done in accordance with the methodology described in Appendix GG. Beginning with calendar year 2023 reporting period, the CCBHC will be recorded under program code 6350 as an OMH OASIS shared program. Refer to Section 8 for more information about recording a shared program on the CFR. A CCBHC is required to file a full CFR. The CCBHC program is reported in aggregate as program 6350 on the core schedule CFR1 through DMH1 and allocated between OMH and OASIS in the claiming schedules DMH2 and DMH3 in accordance with the methodology described below. CCBHC services are never allocated to DOH. The allocation method determines the allocation percentages by assigning each patient and their associated units of service during the reporting period to one of the categories listed below based on the diagnosis codes used for that patient over the course of the reporting period. In the case where any of the patient's diagnosis codes during the reporting period apply to both OMH and OASIS, all the units of service for that patient shall be shared equally between OMH and OASIS. Recipients are to be allocated using the following four categories: OASIS only, OMH only, co-occurring, and DOH only. Under visits, report all the visits during the reporting period for all recipients in each category. Any given recipient will fall into only one of the four categories. An Excel is available at the link on the slide and will serve as a worksheet to aid providers in the calculation. Where the CCBHC visits are counted as the unique patient daily visits for patients who receive CCBHC services. CCBHC service visits may be provided either directly from CCBHC staff or from a designated collaborating organization. If a patient receives services from a designated collaborating organization and the CCBHC on the same day, it shall only count as one daily visit. The results of the calculation should total 100%. The allocated units of service are reported on all applicable CFR schedules with the exception of the OMH4. On the OMH4, the total units of service by payer is recorded representative of the activities of the iOS or CCBHC clinic for the reporting period. CCBHCs should complete the claiming schedules via the DMH1 to the DMH2 transfer function from the utilities menu. After the transfer is complete, you will be able to adjust the data if required. Further, you will need to enter on the DMH2 line 28 the amount of net deficit funding for the respective state agencies. This screenshot is of the DMH1 to DMH2 transfer screen. As stated on the last slide, it is suggested you use this screen for program 6350. It can also be used with other program codes as well. Select your program, then the allocation method you will use of either percentage or unit of service, followed by the county or counties that are needed and their split. Finally, select the Transfer Programs button, and the DMH1 will transfer to the DMH2 based on your selections. CFRS web changes are as follows. The ability to enter data on the date signed fields in the certification CFR1, CFR II, CFR III, and the CFR IV has been removed. Instead, a certification should be signed on the document at the time of signing. For the shared program 6350, the site code field is divided into two separate fields, OASIS site code and OMH site code. Instructions were added to print or view ad hoc reports for provider in the CFRS web user guide. As discussed yesterday, e-sign certifications must be uploaded through CFRS web, and the checkbox attestation must be selected. This attestation will be provided during the upload stage of the CFR certification pages. E-sign certifications will not be accepted unless they are uploaded through CFRS web. Below is the signature attestation for the certification pages found on CFRS Web. OMH supplementals, changes, and highlights. There are 4 supplemental schedules specific to OMH. Supplemental schedules OMH1, OMH2, OMH3, and OMH4, which we will discuss in more detail. The OMH1 schedule is used to report the total units of service by OMH program site. Providers can use Appendix F of the CFR manual to find units of service details for each OMH program. Units of service are very important to us. They are used to determine the cost per unit of service for financial planning. The units of service reported on the OMH1 transfer to the CFR1 and DMH1 on the appropriate lines. The units of service on the OMH1 must match the aggregate total of units of service reported on DMH3 for the same program. Pictured here is the OMH1 from CFRS Web. To report units of service, select the program and site from the drop-down boxes. This process will be repeated for each program. CFR Web will automatically save the data. Please keep in mind that OMH1 is only completed for OMH programs that file a full CFR. OMH2 Medicaid units of service by program site. OMH2 is completed for program sites that accrued Medicaid fee-for-service or Medicaid managed care revenue and should be reported separately for each. Units of service reported for fee-for-service and Medicaid managed care will transfer from the OMH2 schedule to the CFR1 on lines 13A and 13B respectively. Lastly, Medicaid units of service on the OMH2 should not be more than the Medicaid units of service reported on the OMH1. The next few slides include screenshots from CFRS Web. The OMH2 Medicaid units of service is only completed for OMH programs that file a full CFR and have program sites eligible to bill Medicaid. The OMH2 schedule is set up similarly to the OMH1, except each line has an A and a B to track units of service separately for Medicaid fee-for-service revenues and Medicaid revenues received as part of the Medicaid managed care. As you can see, each line has an A and a B. Here we can see the lines associated with day treatment on the OMH2. Lines include brief day, half day, full day, and collateral home and crisis visits. Lastly, we can see the lines for each crisis stabilization center and other and residential. To delete a program from the OMH2 schedule, click the delete button pictured on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. When the delete button is clicked, the following box will appear. Clicking OK will delete the program, or click cancel to return to the screen. OMH3 client information, enter the number of clients served by the program. Caseload at the start of the current period shall equal the caseload at the end of the prior period. OMH3 program without an ongoing caseload. The OMH3 captures the number of persons served by the program and site for the year. The beginning and ending numbers on line 1 and 4 will be 0. Indicate the same number of persons served on lines 2 and 3. These numbers will indicate how many people were seen and how many left. Here's an example of a program with an ongoing caseload. Here the numbers reported may vary. OMH4 units of service by payer by program site. This schedule must be completed for each OMH licensed mental health, outpatient treatment and rehabilitative services, and certified community behavioral health clinic program reported on a full CFR. Program site ID number, use the operating certificate number for the MOTORS program, use the OMH site code for the CCBHC program. The purpose of this schedule is to calculate safety net visits, which will be used in the calculation of the agency's safety net payment. The schedule captures units of service provided by payer and revenues earned for select payers. For the CCBHC, report the total visits and revenue for all services provided by the CCBHC. The name of line 11 was changed to participant fees, not including copays and deductibles. Section 2, the OMH submission matrix and the combination submission matrix were updated to include the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic. Section 33A, Program Code 2100, Mental Health Outpatient Treatment and Rehabilitative Services, and PC Program Code 2320, Intensive Psychiatric Rehabilitation Treatment, have been removed from reporting on the SUPP-1. Section 39, Appendix F, has been updated with the following program codes: 1360, Critical Time Intervention Team Adult; 1940, Critical Time Transition Program; 4860, Intensive and Sustained Engagement Teams. The following OMH program names and descriptions were revised: 0680, Mobile Crisis Services; 2680, Crisis Intervention; 4910, Children and Family Treatment and Support Services, Mobile Crisis Intervention. Following codes were deleted: 2260, Children's HCBS Waiver Crisis Response; 2250, Children's HCBS Waiver Family Support; 2230, Children's HCBS Waiver Individualized Care Coordination; 2280, Children's HCBS Waiver Intensive In-Home; 2270, Children HCBS Waiver Skill Building; and 2370, Children's HCBS Waiver Youth Peer Advocate. Section 47, Appendix Ed, and the following DMH funding source codes were added: 134J, Adult Case Management, Critical Time Intervention. Section 60, line 3 of the OMH4 audit guidelines was updated to include credit losses. Section 66, Appendix GG, allocation of integrated outpatient services clinic and certified community behavioral health clinic. Beginning with calendar year 2023 reporting period, the certified community behavioral health clinic will be reported under program 6350 as an OMH OASIS shared program. All CCBHC providers should follow the updated guidance in Appendix GG for reporting the CCBHC program on the CFR. The CCBHC is required to file a full CFR when transferring the data from DMH1 to DMH2. The calculated CFR allocation percentages of expenses and revenues for the OMH and OASIS are entered as determined from the approved methodology. Additional notes about program code 6350, CCBHC. Units of service are reported on Schedule CFR1. Schedules OMH1, OMH2, and SUPP-1 are not required. OMH providers should continue to use MHPDs to submit corrections, openings, and closures of programs. The programs and sites reported on your CFR should match our concerts database. Attachment A is automatically generated and mailed with each DUTS review letter. It compares the programs listed in our database versus what you reported on your CFR. Any discrepancies between the two should be resolved. Lastly, new for this year, we have added a section on 6 common claiming and closeout errors. The first one is invalid programs and funding source codes. Funding source codes used on the CFR should match the funding source codes on the OMH contract. Make sure the program codes and funding source codes on the CFR match the approved CBR and/or county allocation tracker. Additional program and funding source codes on the CFR that were not on the CBR will hold up your closeout and could result in revised CFRs needing to be submitted. Next, invalid year type or county code. When filing your CBR or CFR, make sure to select the right reporting period. The period of the CFR should match the period of the CBR. Confirm that the county code being used on the CFR matches the county code on the contract and on the CBR or county allocation tracker. New York City programs use County Code 31 on schedules DMH2 and DMH3. Incorrect contract numbers are another common issue. Confirm that contract numbers on the CFR match the contract numbers on the CBRs and/or CAT. Confirm that the contract number for a program matches on the DMH2 and the DMH3 schedules. Selecting incorrect contract type, direct or local. Make sure to select the correct contract type on schedules DMH2 and DMH3. A direct contract is a contract between the service provider and the New York State Office of Mental Health. A local contract is a contract between the service provider and the local government unit. For OMH Medicaid programs that report on schedules DMH2 and DMH3 and do not receive state aid, select local contract and use funding source code 090 non-funded. Lastly, state aid reported on the wrong line. Confirm that the proper amount of state aid funding is included on the CFR and that the amount matches the CBR and/or CAT. State aid is reported on the net deficit funding line of the applicable schedules. And this concludes my part of the training. I will now pass the mic to the next presenter.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Malucci. I work in the Department of Health's Bureau of Mental Hygiene Services Rate Setting Unit, and I will be presenting the DOH highlights and changes. For DOH highlights, the program site identification number, please use the first 4 digits of your agency code, followed by the first 3 digits of your program code. For units of service, Appendix HH provides the units of service measurement for each DOH program. Providers are responsible to confirm units of service are reported accurately in accordance with the program description in Appendix HH. It is very important to accurately report units of service as we use them for evaluating rate adequacy and other rate type analyses. Children and Family Treatment and Support Services, CFTSS. Beginning with the 2023 calendar year CFR, all CFTSS programs are reported on the DOH CFR, regardless of which New York State agency has designated the provider agency or which population is served. This includes the following program codes: 4900 CFTSS Family Peer Support Services, 4910 CFTSS Mobile Crisis Intervention, 4920 CFTSS Youth Peer Supports, 4930 CFTSS Psychosocial Rehabilitation, 4940 CFTSS Other Licensed Practitioner, 4950 CFTSS Community Psychiatric Support and Treatment. For integrated outpatient service clinics, on the CFR, the iOS clinic is reported under program code 2100 for OMH, 3520 for OASIS, and 1580 for DOH. An allocation between OMH, OASIS, and DOH must be made if the provider operated both OMH and OASIS clinics prior to be designated as an iOS clinic. Programs are required to maintain support demonstrating they have used a reasonable method of allocating costs. Please refer to Section 66, Appendix GG, for further instructions. Under DOH changes, Section 8, General Instructions, the response to the following frequently asked question related to CFTSS reporting was updated as follows. Providers that were designated to provide CFTSS to different populations, general mental health, foster care, substance use, should report on the CFR based on the following. Effective January 1st, 2023, all CFTSS programs, regardless of designated agency, are to be reported on the CFR for the Department of Health. For Section 13, CFR1 Program Site Data, the below DOH predefined entry on CFR1 line 94, other revenue, was added. ARPA workforce and infrastructure payments. This line detail is to be used by the following DOH program codes. These are all of the HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver, so 2240, Planned Respite, 2350, Supported Employment, 2360, Pre-Vocational Services, 2380, Crisis Respite, 2390, Caregiver Family Advocacy and Support Services Level 1, 2400, Caregiver Family Advocacy and Support Services Level 2, 2500, Palliative Care, Pain and Symptom Management, 2510, Palliative Care Expressive Therapy, 2520, Palliative Care Counseling and Support Services, 2530, Palliative Care Massage Therapy, 8100, Community Habilitation, 8110, Day Habilitation. For Section 67, Appendix HH, DOH program types, definitions, and codes, the following DOH program codes were added. These are all the CFTSS, so 4900 CFTSS Family Peer Support Services, 4910 CFTSS Mobile Crisis Intervention, 4920 CFTSS Youth Peer Support, 4930 CFTSS Psychosocial Rehabilitation, 4940 CFTSS Other Licensed Practitioner, 4950 CFTSS Community Psychiatric Support and Treatment. The following DOH program names were modified as follows. 2240 Children and Youth HCBS Consolidated Waiver Planned Respite was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Planned Respite. 2350 Child and Youth HCBS Consolidated Waiver Supported Employment was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Supported Employment. 2360 Child and Youth HCBS Consolidated Waiver Pre-Vocational Services was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Pre-Vocational Services. 2380 Child and Youth HCBS Consolidated Waiver Crisis Respite was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Crisis Respite. 2390 Child and Youth HCBS Consolidated Waiver Caregiver Family Support and Services was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Caregiver Family Advocacy and Support Services Level 1. 2400 Child and Youth Consolidated Waiver Community Self-Advocacy Training and Supports was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Caregiver Family Advocacy and Support Services Level 2. 2500 Palliative Care Pain and Symptom Management was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Palliative Care Pain and Symptom Management. 2510 Palliative Care Expressive Therapy was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Palliative Care Expressive Therapy. 2520 Palliative Care Counseling and Support Services was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Palliative Care Counseling and Support Services. 2530 Palliative Care Massage Therapy was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Palliative Care Massage Therapy. 8100 Child and Youth HCBS Children's Waiver Community Habilitation was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Community Habilitation. 8110 Children and Youth HCBS Children's Waiver Day Habilitation was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Day Habilitation. The following DOH program descriptions were modified. 2390 HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Caregiver Family Advocate and Support Services Level 1, and 2400 HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Caregiver Family Advocacy and Support Services Level 2. The following DOH program units of service reporting were modified. 2240 HCBS Consolidated Children's Waiver Planned Respite, 4900 CFTSS Family Peer Support Services, 4910 CFTSS Mobile Crisis Intervention, 4920 CFTSS Youth Peer Support, 4930 CFTSS Psychosocial Rehabilitation, 4940 CFTSS Other Licensed Practitioner, 4950 CFTSS Community Psychiatric Support and Treatment. This concludes the DOH portion of the presentation, and we will now take a 5-minute break.
Good morning. This is Lisa Vickery from the Office of Addiction Services and Supports. Today I will be going over OASIS highlights and changes. The due date for the 2024 CFR financial statements and certifications is June 1st, 2025. Late submissions can be subject to various penalties and fines. Funded and non-funded providers should review the reporting requirements and potential sanctions for noncompliance at the links provided. Sanctions may include impositions of fines, withholding of advance payments, and ultimately termination of state aid, suspension, limitation, or revocation of the operating certificate, notification of noncompliance to DOH in the case of Medicaid providers. For assistance with issues or questions that may arise, contact information is listed for the budget, CFR, FARU, and state aid claims departments. A CFR submission is considered incomplete and a provider non-compliant until the required certification schedules and audited or reviewed financial statements are submitted. OASIS requires a new CFR-I, CFR III, and CFR-IV to be submitted for each new DCN uploaded. Once the initial CFR-III is received for the reporting period, OASIS will accept an attestation reporting minor changes instead of an additional CFR-III unless significant changes to the financial statements are reported. OASIS requests that all certification schedules be submitted electronically through CFRS Web and that providers keep the originals for the required retention period. OASIS will accept emailed PDF files of the certification schedules and attestation statements. They should be included in one PDF file and named as follows: your agency's 5-digit agency code, the reporting period covered, DCN number, names of the certification schedules included in the PDF, and date filed. The subject line of the email should be as follows: agency code, reporting period covered, certification schedules. The DCN on the emailed PDF certification schedules must match the DCN of the uploaded CFR files in the original signature copies maintained in the provider files. OASIS uses the provider contact information contained in the Provider Directory System, or PDS, to distribute program and policy material and announce funding opportunities. To receive these important communications, your organization must keep your agency contact information up to date in PDS to ensure its accuracy and completeness. Instructions and assistance can be found at the link and email address provided. The OASIS State Aid Claims Department name has been updated to the Bureau of Financial Management. The OASIS-only note regarding units of service reporting for CFR-1, line 13 was modified to say, for OASIS treatment programs, the CFR's reporting of programs' units of service should be similar to the units of service reported by the entity, the OASIS Client Data System, or CDS, through the Monthly Service Delivery Function, MSD, except when the reporting guidance varies. Refer to Appendix E for individual program CFR reporting requirements. Program 3520 is no longer required to be reported on the SUPP-1 schedule. A new program category, harm reduction, was added to the OASIS program table in Appendix E, and 3 new programs were added to CFRS Web: 2900, 2950, and 3460. The children's HCBS waiver programs listed on the slide were deleted and should be reported on the DOH CFR. Refer to Appendix HH for the applicable DOH program codes. The names of the following OASIS programs were updated as follows. 4045 is now Specialized Services Outpatient. 4055 is now Specialized Services Residential. The SAPT block grant should be reported on the core and claim as indicated on the slide. Because the contract period for the SAPT supplemental grant funds does not coincide with the standard funding period, you will report the expenses and uses of the funds on the claiming schedules of the reporting period in which they occur. As a result, you may report expenses and revenues with the SAPT supplemental grant funds in more than one reporting period. State Opioid Response, or SOAR, is a federal grant and is distributed through OASIS's fiscal agent, the Research Foundation for Mental Hygiene. SOAR is awarded by the Department of Health and Human Services, which is an available line in the detail box for CFR-1, line 79, federal grants. Like the SAPT grant, the SOAR grant should also be reported on DMH-1, line 25, and DMH-2, line 24. Opioid settlement funds. Report the expenses of the award and the corresponding revenue in the appropriate OASIS program. The revenue should be reported as other revenue on CFR-1, line 94, and DMH-2, line 29, and identified as OSF. If a local government unit, city, or other litigating entities makes any awards of these funds to an OASIS provider for the purpose of providing substance use treatment, prevention, harm reduction, or recovery services, the revenue should be reported as other revenue on CFR-1, line 94, and DMH-2, line 29, and identified as local OSF. Do not report it on DMH-2, line 45. Since this is the draft version of the Opioid Settlement Fund Methadone in Jails Initiative, the final version will be available soon, and the 4 associated slides are for your information only and can be reviewed at your leisure. FARU will perform virtual and on-site visits, and the CFR unit will perform desk reviews of the CFR submissions. Any areas that need additional explanation or revision will be detailed in a CFR review emailed to the provider. Failure to respond to the review may lead to withholding of funding or revocation of certification. Accurate and complete CFR data for OASIS programs is critically important for OASIS fiscal policy development and analysis. Cost report data is also requested and used by other New York State agencies and the federal government for various purposes. The CFR desk review of the core reports includes, but is not limited to, are the certification schedules, audited or reviewed financial statements submitted? Are all active programs reported on the CFR, and do the programs and sites reported match the active programs report? Are the units of service reported on CFR-1, line 13, similar to the units of service reported by the entity to the OASIS client data system through the monthly service delivery function and as reflected in Appendix E? Does CFR-2, column 1, lines 7, 9, and 10 match the financial statements? If the reporting periods of the CFR and financial statements are the same, is the reconciliation completed? Is the CFR-2A fully completed? Is the CFR-3 completed? If line 38 is reported, has the parent agency allocation been submitted through CFRS Web? Are non-allowable expenses reported on CFR-1, line 40, or CFR-3, line 17, adjusted out accordingly on CFR-1, line 66, and or CFR-3, line 41? Are the hourly equivalents reported on the CFR-4 within reason? Hourly equivalents are arrived at by dividing the total amount paid by the total hours paid. If the financial statements indicate related party transactions, is the CFR-5 completed? Are adjustments to costs in column 9 adjusted out on either CFR 1, line 66, or CFR 3, line 41? Is CFR 6 completed? If so, is there an amount in the other benefits, column 9, that must be adjusted out on CFR 3, line 41? If required, is the SUPP-1 completed? Once the core reports are complete, if any of your programs are funded, select the DMH1 to DMH2 transfer button at the bottom left of the DMH1 screen to begin the creation of the claiming schedules. Transferring data from the DMH1 to the DMH2 is essential to avoid calculation errors and underreporting on the DMH2. If your agency receives state aid funding for any OASIS program, you must report all programs operated, funded or not, on the DMH2 and DMH3. If your agency does not operate any state aid funded programs, you are not required to complete the claiming schedules. After transferring the data, you can manually adjust the DMH2 if required. We would not expect DMH2 adjustments to be made in the reporting of personal services, fringe benefits, or OTPS expense categories unless there is also a change in the method of accounting. Certain expenses from the CFR 1, CFR 3, and CFR 5 cannot be claimed for state aid reimbursement. To properly report these expenses, include them fully on the CFR core and claiming documents, then adjust them out of the claiming document as non-reimbursable. A non-reimbursable program expense reported on the CFR 1 and CFR 5 would be fully adjusted out, while a non-reimbursable administrative expense reported on the CFR 3 and CFR 5 would be adjusted out according to the non-reimbursable prorated share. CFRS Web will not transfer vacation leave accruals from the core to the claim because they are considered non-reimbursable. Adjustments are allowed on the claim for the following: equipment and property, addition of an expensed item in the period it was purchased, and subtraction of a non-reimbursable expense such as depreciation, interest, real estate taxes, and mortgage expenses reported on CFR 1. CFRS Web includes drop-down detail boxes to list the adjustments from the core individually. Choose either a predefined line or select Add a Line. For each row of data, select either addition or subtraction to individually list the addition of a fully expensed item or the subtraction of a non-reimbursable expense item. The net amount of these program expenses will transfer to the respective lines of DMH2 line 9 and or DMH2 line 10. If the DMH1 to DMH2 transfer button is not used, these expenses may not calculate correctly. For a complete list of non-reimbursable expenses, refer to page 21.3 of the CFR manual. OASIS does not allow service providers to budget for or claim depreciation and or interest expense for aid to localities or state aid reimbursement. OASIS requires a provider to fully expense all equipment and property purchases during the reporting period. DMH2 line 9 equipment includes the following predefined entries: vehicle depreciation, equipment depreciation, and vehicle interest. In this example, the gray worksheet box shows that the DMH1 equipment total of $13,805 was transferred to DMH2 line 9. The provider then used the drop-down box to add a line for the $10,000 copier purchase and subtracted $17,554 for equipment depreciation using the predefined line. The net amount populated for DMH2 line 9 is $6,251. DMH2 line 10 property includes the following predefined entries: building depreciation, building and land improvement depreciation, mortgage and capital improvement interest, mortgage expenses, real estate taxes, interest on capital indebtedness. In this example, the gray worksheet box shows the DMH1 property total of $81,547 was transferred to DMH2 line 10. The provider then subtracted $80,235 for building depreciation on the predefined line. The net amount for DMH2 line 10 is $1,312. The screenshot on the left shows a highlighted total of $44,120 of CFR 3 non-reimbursables. The screenshot on the right shows how the prorated share of non-reimbursable expense allocated to each program is calculated. The amount highlighted is the amount that should be adjusted out of the claim on DMH2 line 12 for each program. Refer to page 21.3 of the CFR manual for a complete list of non-reimbursable costs to be reported on DMH2 line 12 and the steps used to determine how the CFR 3 calculations of OASIS non-reimbursable costs are derived for each program. DMH2 line 12 is used to report adjustments to expenses and/or non-allowable costs and/or the prorated share of non-reimbursables from the CFR 3 agency administration expenses. Equipment and property adjustments should not be reported on this line. Instead, they should be reported on DMH2 lines 9 and 10. Early retirement incentive payments and severance pay should be fully reported on the core and claim and then adjusted out on DMH2 line 12. An expense considered non-reimbursable for a provider would also be considered non-reimbursable for a related party. Any depreciation expense or mortgage interest expense noted on CFR 5, Section C, columns 4, 5, and possibly 8, which was used to validate the expense in Section B, may need to be adjusted out as non-reimbursable either fully or partially based on the source of the expense. Once the CFR review unit emails a desk review of the CFR submission, a review response is then required from your agency. Generally, 30 days or less is allowed for your response. If you agree with the findings, the CFR should be revised, validated, and a new DCN obtained. Submit it in a PDF format to the analyst with your written response. Once we have confirmed the corrections were made, you will be asked to upload the CFR and submit the required certification schedules. If you disagree with the findings, please provide an additional explanation along with supporting documentation and clarification of your position. This is the end of my section, and I will now hand it over to our next speaker.
Hi, my name is Emily Seward from OPWDD, and today I will cover all of the OPWDD specific highlights and changes. We are based here in Albany on Holland Ave. Starting today with some units of service reporting highlights. To report supervised IRAs, please include the units to all billed therapeutic leave days and retainer days on CFR 1, line 13A. In short, for each unit of service, count one participant day, which includes units of service corresponding to all billed therapeutic leave days and retainer days. In order to report respite program 0311 and 0312, it is important to note that any per diem billing should be reported as 96 units. Instead of program reporting, the following program codes require site-specific reporting: 90, 91, 200, 02, 02, 02, 04, 0231, 0227, 1090, and 1091. In case you are having difficulty allocating site-specific expenses for those programs, a good starting point in the manual is Appendix J. If further direction is needed, please refer to Appendix SF for programs 90, 92, 94, 95, 0203, 0204, 0205, and 0227, 0231, and 1090. OPWDD has the strictest penalties if the CFR, financial statements, and certification pages are not uploaded by the due date. A financial penalty of 2% of Medicaid billing will be imposed until the end of the billing cycle, which will include the first of the month following compliance. Please note that these penalties will not be refunded after the agency comes into compliance. In the case that the provider does not submit to CFR in a timely manner, OPWDD may request that they voluntarily surrender program operating certificates. Not necessarily a new requirement, but a requirement that will be reviewed by OPWDD going forward. We will now be verifying that the CPA firm that audits the financial statements and certifies the CFR has registered with New York State and is compliant with the AICPA peer review program. New CPA firms must register with New York State first and then enroll in the peer review program within 30 days of the initial performance of ad test services. Then the peer review must be done within 18 months. It is important as a provider to verify that your CPA firm meets these requirements. If OPWDD is made aware that a provider's CPA firm is not compliant, the provider will receive a 30-day penalty notice, giving them 30 days from the date of the letter to submit documents showing compliance. If these documents are not submitted, a 2% penalty will be imposed on Medicaid payments. During OPWDD's initial CFR review, we will be pointing out potential issues, but ultimately it is the provider's responsibility to resubmit a corrected CFR, along with certification. This does not apply to CFRs that do not have to submit a II or II-IA. OPWDD requires revised CFRs to be submitted alongside a new certified CFR-I and CFR-I, CFR-IA. My mistake, II-IA and II. Because only CPA certified CFRs will be used for calculation of OPWDD reimbursement levels or any initiative that uses the CFR as basis of calculation of funds. Providers still may submit revised CFRs in response to another agency's request, but OPWDD will not accept them without a new certification. This is just something to keep in mind. If during the reporting period any funding for the Residential Reserve for Replacement program was used, program codes 0294, 0297, and 0298 must be added to the CFR. If these program codes are not utilized for RRR programs, the funds could be put at risk. On this slide, we will review how to report the Workforce Stabilization Initiative. Any revenue for the Workforce Stabilization Initiative must be reported on CFR-1, line 94 other. There are predefined lines to use for Phase 1, which is for title codes in the 200s, and for Phase 2, which is for title codes in the 100s and 300s. Workforce Stabilization personal service costs are to be reported on CFR-1, line 16, and contract services are to be reported on CFR-1, line 35. Any totals from line 16 and line 35 must also be reported on line 68F for title codes in the 200s, or line 68H for title codes in the 100s or 300s. Workforce Stabilization fringe benefits costs are reported on CFR-1, line 18, but must also be reported on CFR-1, line 68G for title codes in the 200s, or line 68H for title codes in the 100s and 300s. Lines 68A through 68I are informational only. OPWDD programs that require a DMH2 and DMH3 should not include revenue or expenses from workforce stabilization. Any difference in expense from DMH1 to the claiming schedule should be reported as an expense variance. Please enter workforce stabilization payments on the explanation of variance line. And here is a screenshot of the OPWDD supplemental section on CFR1. Again, it's important to differentiate that line 68F and G are for phase 1 of the workforce stabilization, and line 68H and I are for phase 2. To receive funding for transportation costs for day treatment, day HAP, or pre-BOC programs, those expenses must be listed in detail in either program 0670 or 0880. Then this expense should be allocated back to the day treatment, day HAB, and/or pre-BOC program sites on CFR1, line 68B. Failure to report these costs on 68B could result in a significant rate cut in the future. Line 68B should be tested by your CPA firm in their audit testing of your CFR. Lines CFR1, line 68A is to be used for transportation expenses other than to or from home and site. Line 68D is used to report the amount that is directly associated with program administration property that was also reported on CFR1, line 63, total property provider paid. Line 63 is the sum of lines 49 through 62 on CFR1. Line 68E is used to report the total billed to Medicaid by the agency, plus what is billed to Medicaid by any other agency for services provided. This line must be utilized for any agency operating an ICF. This slide is a refresher. As stated before, line 68F should be used for expenses related to phase 1 of the workforce stabilization and what was included in CFR1, line 16 and line 35 for personal service expenses. Line 68G should be used for the fringe benefits that were reported on CFR1, line 18, related to phase 1 of the workforce stabilization. Another refresher slide, line 68H, should be used for any personal service expenses that were listed on CFR1, line 16, and line 35, but only those related to phase 2 of the workforce stabilization. Line 68I should be used for any fringe benefits related to phase 2 of the workforce stabilization that was also included on CFR1, line 18. For any provider operating an ICF that also provides day services for ICF residents using ICF staff, and then report these services under Program Code 93, which is in-home services for individuals residing in an ICF. It is very common for the only expense in this program, 93 in these cases, to be staff personal services and benefits, which would then have to be allocated. The OPWDD-1 schedule is used to report services and supplies provided within ICF programs, Program Codes 90 and 1090, operated by OPWDD-funded service providers. A separate schedule must be completed for each site. It is a requirement that the operating certificate number be used as the site code on OPWDD-1 for codes 90 and 1090. If medical supplies, line 6 is reported in either column 2 or 3, then OPWDD-2 must be filled out for that site. As stated in the last slide, if line 6, medical supplies, or column 2 or 3 was completed in OPWDD-1, then that site has to complete the OPWDD-2 supplemental schedule. Similarly, site reporting is required. To complete this schedule, simply check the box next to each medical supply listed that was included in the cost reported on OPWDD 1, line 6, other medical supplies. To conclude the OPWDD section, there are 3 new updates for OPWDD programs in CFRS Web. Program code 0211, Home Enabling Supports, was added to Appendix G and CFRS Web for use. The predefined entries in CFRS Web for CFR1, line 62, now includes condo/co-op fees and common area maintenance fees. And lastly, a new predefined entry for CFR1, line 94, for the OPWDD direct service retention bonus was added. And with that, I will pass it along to the next speaker.
Hello, my name is Ian Hobbs. I'm from the rate setting unit at SED, and I'll be going over the SED highlights, supplemental schedules, and changes. For SED specific providers, financial information submitted within 90 days of January 1st for fiscal filers, or within 90 days of July 1st for calendar year filers, the interest expense on the working capital loans will be reimbursed on a prorated basis. If submissions are received more than 90 days from the specific dates, no interest will be reimbursed. The interest expense is the amount reported on CFR 3, line 12. The portion of the penalty will affect the tuition rates for the next 2 years after the report year associated with the financial information will apply to all tuition rates for that year. As a reminder, this late filing penalty is specific to SED programs, and other state agencies may have their own. This is the RSU website address. Here you'll find useful information like certified tuition rates, regional average rates, including one-to-one, related service and SEET, rate methodology letters, links to CFR manuals and forms, reimbursable cost manuals that define what is and what is not reimbursable for SED reporting, SED4 and RS2 worksheets, links to the CFR web and rules and regulations. It also includes a link to RSU's rate processing application called SEDFIN, which is the portal used to view reconciled and prospective tuition rates. SED has 2 supplemental schedules in CFR, the SED1 for enrollment and classroom data, and the SED4 for related service efficiency reporting. The SED1 is required by all service providers requiring a tuition rate for both school age and preschool programs, and also for infant programs. The first portion of this SED1 is used to report student enrollment data by program by full-time equivalent, or FTE. You must report FTE totals in the appropriate funding source on lines 100 through 107. Report the total days the program operated on line 109. The enrollment figures should align with the tuition revenues reported on Schedule CFR 1, line 69 and or 88 through 92 and or 94. Enrollment is to be reported on an FTE basis. A student is considered full-time or 1 FTE unless admitted after the start date of the school year or is discharged before the end of the school year, or is determined illegally absent. The definition of illegal absence is defined in the Reimbursable Cost Manual, Section 7, and the CFR Manual, Section 32A. FTEs are calculated based upon weeks enrolled divided by the number of weeks the program is in session. FTEs are also prorated when a student is in a program that operates less than 5 hours. This is calculated by the number of hours in the program divided by 5. Care days are used to calculate a per day tuition rate, which is used in the rate setting methodology. Care days equal the FTE times the session days. The CFR manual has more examples of FTE calculations. If you have students that require one-to-one aid, the FTEs and associated costs should be reported in program 9230 and in the program the student is enrolled in. The bottom portion of the SED1 is used to capture the classroom information. Here you will report the approved classroom ratios, the number of classrooms operated, and the corresponding FTEs for that ratio. Only ratios that have been approved by the Office of Special Education can be accepted during the rate setting process. If you operate a special class in an integrated setting program, only report the ratios approved for special education, not the overall general education ratio. For example, the overall ratio is 15:1:2, but the special ed ratio is 7:1:1. You should report the 7:1:1 ratio on the SED1. If you operate a special education itinerant services, also known as SIAS or SEIT, you should report the mandated units of service on line 111 and the actual units of service provided on line 115. The mandated units should align with the units of service reported on line 13 of CFR 1. Units of service are reported on a half-hour basis and should be reported on a per-session basis. Mandated units of service should be reported by county in the appropriate program to the student's IEP and which individual program or individual group. Here's a screenshot of an example of an SED1 from the CFR web print version. You'll notice that each program is separated out by summer and school year, and also separated out by SS and FF, since this is for a calendar provider. The FF would indicate the 6 months of the fall, and the SS would be 6 months of the spring. And this one is an example of how the SS and the FF are merged together for rate setting purposes. The SED4 is used to capture related service data and measure the efficiency of the related service being provided to the students. It is broken down into 3 sections: capacity, need, and productivity. Capacity is the half-hour sessions the school is able to provide based on their school hours and staff allocation. Need is based on mandatory requirements per the student's IEP. Productivity calculates the percentage of related service provided versus capacity. The SED4 is required for all rate-based programs except SEIT programs. The RS2 does not need to be filed with SED. It is only used as a guide for reporting on the SED4. An Excel version can be found on the RSU website under Manuals and Forms. The FTEs reported on the SED4 should reconcile to the FTEs reported on Schedule CFR4 for the appropriate related service titles. This screenshot is an example of an SED4 from the CFR web print. Data from the RS2 is used to formulate the data reported on the SED4. Instructions for the RS2 can be found on the RSU website under Manuals and Forms. Be sure to separate the RS2 by each related service type. The RS2 has a new column, column 13, annual IEP mandated related service sessions not provided due to telepractice accessibility issues. And that concludes the SED supplemental schedules, and I'll pass it on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Hi, this is Paul Green from the Office of Addiction Services and Supports. We're going to start with the SUPP-1 upper payment limit. The SUPP-1 schedule collects data for use in the upper payment limit calculation. The UPL is a federal limit placed on fee-for-service reimbursements of Medicaid providers. Hospitals and federally qualified health centers are exempt from completing the SUPP-1 schedule. All other OMH, OASIS, and OPWDD providers who complete a full CFR and operate any of the following programs must complete the SUPP-1. You will notice that each one of the agencies there, OASIS, OMH, and OPWDD, have removed one of their programs. So this has been updated. Okay. Providers who fail to submit the CFRs or submit inaccurate or incomplete information may lose any supplemental UPL payments they would otherwise be entitled to. This is a screenshot of CFRS Web where you complete the SUPP-1. You'll see the first question they ask is your provider agency a hospital or federally qualified health center? Next, it lists the state agency, the program, and the site, followed by the MMIS billing number. And then there's 4 columns of information. Column 1, 2, and 4 have to be completed. Column 3, which is grayed out, is a calculated column. So total visits, you'll find this information on your CFR1, lines 13A, B, and C. Gross revenues needs to be input, and then finally in column 4, net revenues. Report the number of total threshold visits by the payer. For purpose of the schedule, a visit is defined as including all services provided to a patient on the same day. And then a qualifying visit goes on. There's more description as to that. But the main thing to keep in mind is that if a provider comes in the morning for a private session and then in the afternoon for a group session, it's still only one visit for that day. So that's the main thing to keep in mind. For OASIS opioid treatment programs under the APGs, they are billed weekly, but they still count the visits as daily, okay? So even though the claim is billed weekly, you would still count the visits as daily. The only time that this is ever changes is under bundles. Under bundles, if it's billed weekly, then the visit would be a weekly visit. But as I say, in most situations, it is a daily visit. Okay. Budget modifications. If you haven't done so already, compare your projected expenses and revenues to your approved budget now. If it appears a modification to your approved budget is required, consult a funding near state agency for guidance. So we don't generally speak too much about budgets because we have our agencies have budget departments to answer your questions. Okay, so if you have a question about what to put on your budget or when your budget is due, reach out to our state agency's budget departments. However, if you have a question with the software, we can assist on that. So if you're having a problem in completing or getting into the software to complete your CBRI, CBR4, DMH2, admin worksheet, DMH3, or such, you can contact us and we will try to help you with the software part of it. One of the things that I do get questions on is the admin worksheet. So this is a screenshot of the admin worksheet. There's two different ways to complete an admin worksheet. And again, what you're trying to do there is you're trying to take the administrative expenses and proportion it to different programs. Well, the tricky part of it is this budget may only be reporting one of your programs or maybe two of your programs, and the other 7 programs are not on this. So it gets a little bit tricky, but there's 2 ways to handle this scenario. One is the top left, there's an override button where when you click that, this admin worksheet becomes null and void, and then you can just type in the amount on the DMH2 of agency admin that you want applied to that program. Okay. However, the budget departments may not appreciate this, and they may not even allow it. So you would probably have to get their approval to use that override automatic calculation. The more preferred way of doing it is to not use that and instead to complete lines 6 and 8 as noted below. So line 8 is your net agency administration. So that would be $250,000 for all your programs. Line 6 is the operating cost for all your other programs besides the OASIS program in this case. So line 1 is your OASIS program. So the operating costs of $20,000 for OASIS, $120,000 for your other programs, total up to $140,000. And then if you do the math, you will see that 1.785 ratio of that $250,000 total will be applied to OASIS. So again, for the budget admin worksheet, all you have to do is complete lines 6 and 8. And if you do that, you'll be using ratio value, which is the preferred method by the budget departments for determining this. Okay, the remainder of the presentation is directed towards agencies that submit a claiming document, which is a DMH2 and DMH3. If your agency does not, then you may leave at this time. Agencies that file a claiming document include those receiving state aid, local aid in the form of net deficit funding. Agencies that do not file a claiming document include OASIS, OMH, and OPWDD providers that do not receive any state aid for any programs, and SED and DOH providers. So again, if you're an SED and DOH provider only, then and you do not get any state aid from OASIS, OMH, or OPWDD, you can leave at this time. If you are unsure whether you submit a claiming document, if you're newer to this process, just stay for the next 15-20 minutes. It's quick and it is informative. Okay. So as I say, we're going to move on to the claiming. Okay. As we've mentioned previously, the CFR is both the core reports and the claim reports. Okay, so it's 2 different reports combined into one. The core reports, CFR1 through DMH1, ended right here. This is the DMH1. You've completed all the information on the core reports. It matches up to your financial statements. You feel pretty good about it. And now it's time to begin your claiming schedules, okay? So we recommend you use the button on the bottom left-hand corner, which says DMH1 to DMH2 transfer. You would click on that, and then you would see a list of your programs. Now you have 5 programs there. Francis went over it quickly, so I'll skim through it quickly. You can choose all 5, or you can choose a combination of programs within the 5, and you can select a percentage, and you can send it to that county, okay? And then at the bottom left corner, you click Transfer Programs. Over to the far right, you'll see that data already exists in the DMH2. So basically, by transferring it again, you're overriding that data, okay? Once you've clicked on this and transferred the data, it will go over, and then you'll have a DMH2 in that county. Now, as also Francis also alluded to, if you wanted to send, for some reason, 60% of the expenses and revenues to one county and 40% to another, you could do that. I don't think this is common, but you can do that. And if at any time you want to make changes, you can use the trash can on the far right to delete it. Once you've transferred the data, it will say that there's already data in those files. Do you want to override it? Yes, you do. And now it's been successfully transferred. However, some of the DMH2 lines require detail lines. You will need to edit those lines on the DMH2, okay? And that's the grayed out lines. So Medicaid fee-for-service, the total amount transferred over, the $275,392 transferred over, but the drop-down details did not. And in order to pass validations, you'll need to click into the drop-down box and input Medicaid fee-for-service, $275,392, because the details need to add up to the amount on the line, okay? And if you forget to do this, you'll be reminded during the validation process. Okay. Now you've got a new DMH2, and it's for Oasis agency, and the county. County is 31, which is incorrect, but I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. Program 3520. And then you have to go down and you have to pick the contract type. It's either a direct contract, which is basically monies received directly from New York State through a direct contract with the state, or it's a local contract, which is monies received from the LGU through a contract between the LGU and the service provider, okay? And then you have to put in the accounting method and the state contract number. The accounting method, whereas you were accrual-based accounting for the core reports, now you have the choice of accrual, modified accrual, or cash. However, the choice has to be approved by your state agency also. Most of our providers use accrual, and then they write in the state contract number. Okay. And the state contract, if it's a direct contract, it'll usually start with a C or a T and then 00 and such. A local contract number can be much more varied. It could be a county name, it could be a number, it could be almost anything. Once you've input this information, you'll move to the next, which is the expenses. Personal services, fringe benefits, and OTPS, those numbers transferred over from the core, and we would not expect those numbers to change unless maybe there's a change in accounting method. Okay, but if it's the same accounting method, we would expect those numbers to change, or not to change. The vacation leave accruals will change, especially, well, for OASIS they will, because OASIS funded service providers cannot report vacation leave accruals for state aid reimbursement. Okay, so no vacation leave accrual amounts will not transfer over. And as for the equipment, property, and adjustments, those amounts for OASIS, there's a drop-down box. And that in that drop-down box that we already discussed, you can make your adjustments to remove your depreciation and add your expensing of equipment and such. Okay. The other state agencies do not have the drop-down box. However, the amount that you're reporting there on lines 9, 10, and 12 may differ than the core because they also believe in expensing the items instead of depreciating them. So next is the Medicaid fee-for-service. I already discussed this. The total amount transferred over, but you'd have to use the drop-down box, detail box, in order to match the 275 detail. And then the next tab, the third tab, is the adjustments to revenue tab. But before we get to that, we have line 28, which is very important here. This is the net deficit funding for state and local government funding, okay? This has to be completed, and sometimes people forget to do it, and we catch it on review. Well, in the future, there's going to be an error code. So if you're filing a claim, you need to include net deficit funding on line 28, and if not, you'll get an error code stating that. Okay. All right, and now here's your GAAP adjustments to revenue and non-GAAP adjustments to revenue. If you have any questions on this, you can refer to section 22 of the CFR manual. There's more guidance on it. But what the end result here is line 43, net operating cost. All right, net operating cost is your total expenses less your revenues except for state aid. Okay, so if your total expenses were $1 million and you had Medicaid of $600,000, then your net operating, and even if you have $400,000 of state aid, your net operating cost would be $400,000. So that's the total expenses less all the revenue besides state aid. In this case, a net operating cost is $421,000. Okay. So we go to the next tab, which is deficit funding. Deficit funding is lines 44 through 48. They total up on 49. And line 49 must equal line 43, net operating costs, or else you will not be able to pass validations. Okay. It gets a little complicated, the completing of this deficit funding section. The different agencies handle it a little bit differently. So I'm just going to read through this a little bit, and just so you understand, anything that's being said today is in that handout that we sent you yesterday, okay? So I realize you're not going to be completing the CFR for another month or two. So that handout that you received yesterday, save that, and these are considered speaker notes. These speaker notes are included in that handout, and they should come in handy when you're doing completing the claim, okay? You also have the ability to go back and watch the recording on YouTube, too. So anyways, line 44 is equal to the state shares. Okay, so that's the amount of money that came from the state. Line 45 is for county tax dollars. All right, note, OASIS, for funded programs with a direct contract, the total of state share, line 44, and local government share, line 45, should equal the net operating cost, line 43. So this is for direct contracts. So if the amount was $421,000 of net operating costs for OASIS direct contracts, you would put in $421,000 of state share. Even if your net deficit funding was higher or lower, you would just put in that amount. And the reason you did that is because they were doing a 2-year closeout and they were taking 2 years into account, and they definitely did not want you to use non-funded, because if it's a state contract and you use non-funded, it created a problem for OASIS. Okay. For funded programs with a local contract, consult your county representative. So I have a hard time speaking for the counties regarding this. So you might want to talk to them on how they want this reported. Line 46, providers voluntary contribution, OASIS programs line non-enterable. Line 47 is a subtotal amount. Line 48, non-funded. Okay. OASIS non-funded programs report the program deficit positive or surplus negative. Funded programs with a direct contract should not use line 48. Funded programs with a local contract should consult their county representative. All right, so the question is, why are non-funded programs being reported on the claim? Because in OASIS and OMH, if you're reporting one program on your claim, you have to report all your programs on the claim. So if you have 6 programs and 5 of them are funded but one is not, you're still going to report it on the claim, and you're going to report that as non-funded on line 48. Okay. OMH line 48, non-funded. This is the surplus or deficit of funding over expenses. DMH2 line 43 less line 47. And for OPWDD, regarding line 48, indicate the amount of all other funding used to support the net operating costs, which does not fall into lines 44 through 47 above. Okay. So it's a little complicated. The main thing to keep in mind is that line 49, total net deficit funding, must match line 43, or you cannot pass validations. And because each agency handles it a little bit differently, you should probably refer to the CFR manual when you're for additional guidance. Okay. The final tab is the expense variance tab. This is helping the reviewers to see what the differences are, if there are differences, in an explanation of what the difference is. So as I said, on the core report, the DMH1, the amount is compared to the claim amount. And if there's a difference, it would be under variance. And if there's a variance, we need an explanation of variance. Okay. So in this case, no difference, no explanation. In this case, there is a difference, and the explanation is vacation leave accruals is non-reimbursable for OASIS. Okay. You don't have to write a paragraph. You just have to write a sentence explaining it. And if we have any additional questions, we'll ask you on review. So again, no explanation here, no explanation here. But then the next one is the equipment line, and it changed a variance of $13,000 and the adjustment for equipment purchased. Okay. Next is property, and there is a variance of negative $1312. But there is no explanation, so you'll get that error code in red. Explanation is required. And I believe you will not be able to pass validations without fixing that. All right, so this is a feature that helps us, and it's going to be, we're going to add revenues to it next year. But as of right now, it is something that needs to be completed. All right. Now, if back on the bottom left-hand corner, there's 3 yellow buttons: change county, define DMH-only programs, and delete. Okay. As I said before, the county I had selected was New York 31. Well, that was an error. I must have just hit the wrong one. So if I want to change that, I could delete it and start again, transfer it again, or I could just go to the Change County button. The current county is New York 31. I select the new county from the drop-down, and then once I've selected it, I hit Update County, and it just changed it from New York to Niagara, okay? So Change County has always been a button that will save you some time, because you do make mistakes. So keep that in mind. Okay. The other one is define a DMH only program. We've had this for a long time, and I've never really had a good example as to why you would use it. However, CFRS Web was designed to be flexible because we understand that you have people people from the county or from the state claims department asking you things, and they might be asking you different things. So you need some flexibility. So define a DMH-only program is to allow you to add an extra column of data on the claim, okay? So if you had a column of data on the core and you had $1 million of expenses, and then you added an extra column on the claim for $200,000, well, now you would have a mismatch. You'd have $1 million on the core and $1.2 million on the claim. So if you're going to add another column, you have to remember to subtract that amount from the original column. Okay. There's a lot of information on defining a DMH-only program. It's in the help menu, and it's in the manual. So if you need assistance with it, you can feel free to call the CFR review unit, and we're happy to help you. As I say, we've been talking about it for years, and I haven't had a lot of people that actually ever used it. However, OASIS has a program for 2025 that's going to be using this. So it's under this methadone in jails initiative, where they're going to actually be giving it to you in for the core reporting in the 2050, but on the claim, you're going to break out a portion of this and put it under 4084 jail-based services. So again, we won't talk about that now. We'll talk about that next year. But I just want to say the CFRS web is designed to give you some flexibility. So if you find a situation where you don't think you can satisfy all parties, talk to us, and maybe we can help you get through that situation. Okay? All right, so going back to it, if you created a new program, a 2050, and you assigned an index code of 05 to it, if you created it, it would be here under the edit, delete of a DMH-only site from the program site definition screen. Okay, so you create it in the DMH2, but you edit it from the program site definition screen. All right. And then finally, delete. Okay, to delete a DMH2, say you just added one, erroneously, you want to get rid of it, you go to it, you select the state agency, the county, the DMH2, and then from the bottom of the screen, you select delete. It comes up with a warning box. Do you want to delete it? Yes, that's okay. And that's pretty much a DMH2 in a nutshell. So now just a quick summary of it. It's completed on a New York State agency and county specific basis. So in other words, your OMH DMH2 would be separate from your OASIS DMH2. The method of accounting must be indicated over each column, and it can be modified accrual or cash basis of accounting. But if you're changing from what you used last year, you will likely need permission from somebody in regional office or your county or such. And direct or local contract, as OMH said earlier, is very important that you select the right one. Direct contract is money coming directly from the state. Local contract is money that the state gave to the county, and then the county gave to you. Direct contracts generally start with a C or T. If there is no local contract number, enter the first 7 letters of the county. If the county's name is 7 letters or less, enter the complete county name. Okay. Agency administration is distributed between the New York State agencies using ratio value. That is a must. Within OASIS and OPWDD schedules, the software calculator ratio value must be used. Equipment may be expensed rather than depreciated. Equipment costing $5,000 or more per unit and having a useful life of 2 or more years must be reported on line 9, and additional detail is required in the reporting of revenue on the other lines. Okay, and line detail boxes. So next is Schedule DMH2 is not automatically updated. So if you submit a CFR, you go through the whole process, and it's DCN number 1234 5678. You submit that, and the review unit says we want corrections, and you submit. You take it back. You make corrections to the CFR1 and to the CFR4, and you're getting ready to submit it again as a different DCN number. Well, you have to remember those corrections did not automatically flow to the claim. So you would have to go back to the DMH1 and transfer that data over to the claim again, okay? If not, you'll be submitting a new DCN number with changes to the core, but the same numbers to the claim. So you have to keep that in mind. All right, DMH3. DMH3 is all about funding source. Okay. For each claim, each column on the claim, there should be a DMH3 to go with it. Okay. For this particular program, you would select a funding source, 013B, behavioral health. And if it turns out that you selected the wrong funding source, you can go down to the bottom and click on Change Funding Source. In this case, I had transferred the information over, and New York is the county. So again, that's the wrong county. So I got to go down to the bottom left and click on Change County. You also have an ability just to delete it and start from scratch. But with the DMH3, once you select the program, once you select the funding source, then you have to complete lines 11, 12, 13, and 14. 11 is the number of units of service. 12 is the total expenses. 13 is total revenue, and 14 is net operating cost. Okay. So if you find you have you want to change the county, you can click on Change County, and you can do it the same way that we did before. If you want to change the funding source, you can click on Change Funding Source, and you can do it just as we did before. Or if you want to delete the funding source, you can go here and delete it, and it will ask you, are you sure you want to do so? And yes. And you also have the ability to make these changes from the Utilities section of the menu. Okay. This is an example of more than one funding source for a program. So, and you can see that because number of units of service is 8,800. That's what you've typed in here. But over in the far right, the total program for this, total units of service for this program is 10,800. So you're missing 2,000 units of service, okay? So what that means is there's a second funding source. Whereas this one is 013S, the next one is 090S, and there's your 2,000 units of service, okay? So you can have more than one funding source for a program, and the far right column is a running total of the units of service, expenses, revenues, and net operating cost. DMH3 input must equal DMH2 input, okay? And if it doesn't, you'll get these red error codes. Program totals for total adjusted expenses, line 12, must equal DMH2, line 13. It's not that complicated. All you have to do is change your input from 771 to, from 791 to 771, and you'll be all set. You'll pass validations. So if there is a problem, it will tell you exactly what you need to do. All you have to do is read it and do it. But basically, once you pass those, then you should be able to pass final validations. If you have a problem with a DMH3 in final validations, if it says something like your contract number is not matching or your contract type, go to the utilities, go to update, delete funding source codes, and look and see if maybe there's an erroneous funding source code there that transferred over that shouldn't be there. And then once you delete that, you'll probably find you're in much better condition. All right, so summary of the DMH3 for OASIS and OMH, the contract number and type indicated for each program will be transferred to the DMH3 because they must match. For OPWDD, at least one contract number and type, state or local combination indicated for each program on DMH3 must match the information indicated for that program on DMH2. The DMH3 is completed on a New York State agency and county-specific basis. Funding source codes are found in Appendix N of the CFR manual. Contract numbers must be entered. Contract type must be designated. For each funding source, enter person served per year, units of service, total adjusted expenses, applied net revenue, net operating cost per funding source. The person served per year and units of service, they're not necessary for all programs. If a program doesn't collect that information, then it wouldn't be necessary here. So check your Appendix E through G of the CFR manual or consult with the funding DMH state agency. And this is just an explanation that the total adjusted expenses on the DMH2 must equal DMH3. And that's the end of the claiming. So on that note, I will transfer the microphone back to the host. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Help function. When you are in a doubt, use the help function. We believe this is a useful tool. Within the menu function at the bottom, you can find the help icon. When you click that, a PDF file with the help contents will open in the separate browser tab. You can also click on the help icon next to the schedule name. A PDF file specific to the schedule will open in separate browser tab. Thank you once again for participating in the CFR training webinar for the calendar 2024 Consolidated Fiscal Report. In case you missed the beginning of the webinar, please take the time to fill out the post survey after you leave the event. It will help us make this training better. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted online shortly. An email will be sent out notifying you of the location. The Q&As will be carefully reviewed and answer will be posted online as soon as possible. This concludes second CFR training session. Thank you.